I'm Ben Meiselas, and the Trump Organization is a defendant in a criminal trial currently taking place in Manhattan Courthouse right now. And who better to break down what is going on in the case where the Trump Organization, I repeat again, is a criminal defendant, none other than Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen's got a book out right now, Revenge: How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics. Check out the book Revenge. Make sure, if you don't have Revenge, make sure you go check it out right now or after this interview and you buy a copy. Also, Michael Cohen is wearing the Trump Mar-a-Lago Correction Facilities shirt, available at store.MeidasTouch.com. People have asked where they can get that shirt at store.MeidasTouch.com, or should I say Mar-a-Lardo. Michael Cohen, welcome to the Meidas Touch special. Trump Organization is a criminal defendant edition. How are you?
I'm doing good, Bagel Ben. So look, first of all, when you guys sent me this t-shirt, I have to be honest, it's incredibly soft. You know, normally you get these sort of t-shirts and they're hard feeling. It's not even like good quality. This is really very soft. I was very shocked. Very good quality. Nice job.
Well, it's 100% union made, 100% made in America. We make sure that all our stuff is A+, and that includes our A+ coverage of all things taking place in our justice system, all things taking place in our democracy. And here we have the Trump Organization, a criminal defendant in this trial being pursued by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We're talking about day one of the trial. The case involves the 15-year scheme by the Trump Organization to compensate its executives in an off-the-books manner, not reporting it, engaging in fraudulent conduct. Of course, Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization, pled guilty, had to pay a $2 million fine, and it's about 5 months in prison. And he's the star witness, purportedly, that we're going to see in this trial, talk about his involvement in connection with the Trump Organization. And Cohen, your name was thrown out today, actually, on the potential witness list. I know you kind of got, your phone got blown up around 2 o'clock or so when that was read out. What can you tell us about what happened today, and why are you on the witness list?
So I don't know why I'm on the witness list, other than considering I gave about 100 hours worth of testimony and 1,000 documents to the district attorney, specifically when it was being run by Cyrus Vance Jr., our former district attorney. Currently, as you know, we have Alvin Bragg, and there was a whole scenario that took place where he decided not to charge Trump for other crimes, including crime that I pled guilty to, which is the Southern District case of the NDA with Stormy Daniels. I am very confused. In fact, not only am I confused, but so was Mark Pomerantz, who was, and is, I should say, just an absolutely brilliant lawyer, along with Carrie Dunn, who was the former general counsel to the district attorney's office, as to why that case never proceeded forward and that the jury was disbanded, and that was the second jury. Statute of limitations ran on that, and that's over. Today was a very uneventful day. I want to be honest with all of your viewers. This is not the day that we are looking for. This is a day of voir direing all of the jurors in order to see who will be the select 12 plus the standbys. There were by the first part of the morning, over 100 jurors that were already spoken to and questioned. And I guess what they did is around 2 o'clock, the judge had read off a combined witness list. In that way, if there was anybody that were potential jurors who knew any of the potential witnesses, they clearly would have a conflict and they would no longer be capable of serving. I guess that's why they put the list out there for everybody to see. Today was a very uneventful day. We don't even know how many jurors yet have been selected, not challenged, etc. I'm sure somebody will leak that down the road. But today was one of the days, and tomorrow will likely be the same thing. It'll be several days before which they finally narrow down the list so that we know who the prospective jurors in this case are.
Give us some insight into this case, Michael. You know some of the key figures here. I mean, you worked with them, so you know Alan Weisselberg. You know about his character, or should we say lack thereof. You know about the various schemes taking place within the Trump organization. What should our viewers, what should people be looking for in this criminal trial? What would you be looking for?
It's really going to be more about the testimony and the questions that are asked to Alan Weisselberg. So, as Bagel Ben previously stated early on, when we first started this, is that when Alan Weisselberg was first indicted for this, he was going to take this case all the way to the end. He was going to trial. And of course, we all know that to be bullshit. He was not going anywhere near this as a trial because they would have thrown the book at him. So instead, his lawyers end up making a deal. But that deal was held back by the judge until such time as he testifies in this upcoming case, which again, and Ben rightfully stated it, this is a criminal case against the Trump organization. Now, something that seems to perplex not just myself, but many attorneys is how do you convict an LLC, an INC, a corporation? Shouldn't there be somebody that has to take the blame for the conviction of the corporation? What we know is that in the event that they're found guilty, there is an amount of money that they're looking for. It's something in the tune of like $1.6 million. Well, if that's all that it's about, Donald can easily fleece these foolish MAGA fools all throughout this country, raise the $1.6+ million in a heartbeat and put an end to this. So I think there's something more going on here. And again, I am anxious to hear the questions that Alvin Bragg will be asking Alan Weisselberg. And one of the conditions that the judge placed on Weisselberg, while holding off on the upcoming sentencing post this case, is that if he lies, if he does not tell the truth, if he does not answer every single question that he has direct knowledge of, he could be looking at up to 15 years as opposed to the 5 months, which will really translate into about 100 days. But he will be doing that up in Rikers Island, which, rest assured, is it's no Camp Cupcake. Not that you want to go to Camp Cupcake either.
So a lot of people have talked about.
Yeah, I'm just anxious, Ben, to find out, like, your opinion. What do you think the questions that Alvin Bragg should be asking of Weisselberg? And if I can, I'll just start. The first question is, how many of the 1,000, let's just say there's 1,000 checks written a month. How many of those 1,000 checks, Alan, do you sign off on your own without having sign-offs by Donald, meaning that he's directly involved and fully knowledgeable of the issues?
What I'd want to know, Michael, too, is, to your point there, to really get into the process and procedure and to kind of remove the smoke and mirrors around how does this organization really function? And I really want to get into the weeds here. Like, how does Donald Trump, to your point, sign off on decisions? How are decisions made in the Trump organization? What role are the kids have? What role did Donald Trump have while he was serving as the president? Normally companies have some process and procedure when decisions are made. Are there board meetings held? How does email go back and forth for someone who we know doesn't use email in a typical sense? Ultimately, the buck would stop with the head of the organization. And as you said, and if you've always told us before, and you've told Congress, all roads always lead to Donald Trump, right, Michael? There's not a single decision that's made at that organization without Donald Trump. I want to talk briefly about, to your question as well, about a corporate defendant and what the ramifications are for a corporate defendant. The ramifications in a case like this is what you said, Michael. It's a fine. There isn't someone at the end of the day who goes to jail when a corporate defendant is found guilty. But in addition to the underlying fine, if you're found guilty, if the corporation is guilty of a crime, that could also cause the corporation to default on a number of loan covenants that would have issues relating to if you are a criminal enterprise. And so I think that's what's at stake here as well. But Michael, can you give our viewers and listeners some insight, though, into the way the organization runs? And how do you think those questions would be answered if Weisselberg does tell the truth?
Well, first of all, Weisselberg has to tell the truth. Otherwise, he could be looking at, again, up to 15 years. As it relates to process, the process is very simple. If you have an invoice that needs to be paid, the way that you do it is, you could always, of course, give it to Alan after you sign off accepted. So hypothetically, if I was going to be traveling to California on behalf of Trump Business, I would then take, for example, the plane tickets. And at the bottom of it, I would put Michael Cohen, accepted, and on the date that I submitted it, and I would sign my name to it. That document would go to Alan. Alan would place it in a file folder. The file folder would then be left on Donald's desk when there were, let's say 10, 15, 20, whatever the number might be. He will look each and every one of those invoices over and then either put his initial or just write Donald or something like that. But he will execute his initial or name on each and every one of those documents. Those documents would then be taken by one of his executive assistants and returned to Alan, who would then give it to this woman by the name of Donna, who would then prepare the checks. And then those checks would then, again, go back to Trump for signature. So it is a process. This isn't like there's just free, action that you can just take on behalf. It's really a multi-pronged process. And again, Trump not only sees the invoice in order to sign off to have a check cut, but on top of that, he also signs each and every check himself. And that's why I said, as the question that I would lead off with, out of 1,000 checks, Alan, how many checks do you sign without sign off by Donald? And the answer is probably 2 or 3, give or take. Ones that are under $1,000, and maybe it has to do with, Con Edison or a phone bill or something like that. That is a regular monthly revolving expenditure. Other than that, Donald was involved in every single aspect, including signing off on the acquisitions of pens and paper clips and paper and so on. So the notion that he's going to be able to now discredit any witness by stating that he has no knowledge or information as to why these people were given apartments or why these people were given cars and why it wasn't included in their compensation package. My suspicion is that he will elect to throw not Alan Weisselberg under the bus, because Alan is extremely valuable to him right now, and he wants to keep him after learning how stupid he was and the way he treated me and some other individuals. So he will try to keep Alan within the circle. He will look to throw Mazars, which is the accounting firm, under the bus, as well as the accountant who was handling those files. It's not going to work. An accountant is not supposed to understand what you're doing. What they do is they take the information that you provide, and then they do the best that they can in terms of putting forth your tax returns. In my specific case, my accountant didn't do that. He messed up. And then instead of coming clean and saying, hey, look, I messed up, he was given immunity to testify against me. And again, if you read it in Revenge, the story you think you know about me, you don't. Most of it is a lie. And most of it was the direct result of the Southern District of New York putting a gun to my wife's head and threatening that if I didn't plead guilty in a 48-hour period, not like Alan Weisselberg, who had 2 years to fuck around with this. All right. I had 48 hours over a weekend, or they were going to indict my wife. And anyone, especially Trump, who knows how I feel and how much I love my wife. And, there's not a chance in the world that I was going to let them, perp walk her out of our building in handcuffs and process her. It just wasn't going to happen. And I never in my life thought that the judge was going to do it. My hope is that the judge in this case sees through all the bullshit after all the things that, Ben, you and and your brothers and Midas Touch and Lincoln Project and Democracy Now! And Mea Culpa, all the things that we've done. My hope is that we have opened up the eyes to at least a judge who legitimately wants to, do what he's required to do pursuant to oath and law, and hold those responsible who should be held accountable.
Well, and he didn't just shed light on this ongoing criminal case here that's taken place this week, but also New York Attorney General Letitia James in her civil lawsuit for $250 million, which would essentially...
No, Ben, I'm sorry, I got to correct you on that. It's a minimum of $250 million. I kind of correct everybody on this. If you read the paper, it's a minimum. That means Tish James, our brave attorney general who really is taking this thing to the mat, it's a minimum of 250. Knowing the documents, the personal financial statements that I provided, all of the corresponding and additional information provided, I promise you that number is not 250 million, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was somewhere more in the ballpark of 750 million to $1 billion.
One of the things that Letitia James has done in connection with that action is she's filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, which is set to be heard on October 31st. And if granted, an independent monitor would be appointed by the court to look at each and every document, financial document that Donald Trump signs, any financial valuation that he claims, any documents he submits to potential lenders and insurance companies and so on. How crippling, knowing that organization, would an independent monitor appointed by the court looking over Trump's shoulders at each and every turn be for that organization if that relief is granted on the 31st?
Right. So it would be crippling, but more important, the reason that she did that, and again, if I was wearing one of our Mea Culpa or Midas Touch hats, I would take it off to her, right, and salute her. What she realized, because they're obviously tracking the actions of the Trump organization, what Trump did, and again, this just goes to show you how fucking stupid that they all are, from Donald all the way down to the kids. They opened up a company based out of Delaware, and they called it, not surprisingly, Trump Organization 2. Well, what do you think that they were doing? She obviously immediately realized what was going on, and she files this injunction to prohibit the Trump Organization from transferring, hypothecating, taking out, any loans, giving interest, whatever, any action on any of the properties. Because what he would do in order to make more difficult the ability of Tish James after she gets this whopping judgment against the Trump Organization would be to seize the assets, because they would be owned by this Trump Organization 2 based out of Delaware as opposed to New York. What she's going to do in this New York action, this civil action, what she is permitted to do, if a guilty determination is reached, she could immediately suspend the company from doing business. She could take them out of good standing. She could dissolve the company, and she could take the stock of the company, meaning its assets, in order to satisfy the judgment that she's going to have. Now, of course, Donald will have the ability, and I don't for 1 second believe he won't do this, of course, file an appeal onto it. But my suspicion is that appeal will end up being resolved very, very quickly. she will basically deactivate the Trump organization, and all of the assets that are here in New York are easy for her to take, as opposed to assets that are outside of the state of New York, especially like the ones in Florida, where she would have to reach out to the governor, in this specific case, Ron DeSantis, who I promise you would never cooperate with the New York Attorney General's office.
Well, here's the thing, too. In the special proceeding that Letitia James went through before the filing of the lawsuit, people sometimes forget, with all the Trump news going on, she deposed Donald Trump, right, Michael? And Trump had the opportunity to answer all the questions. You know, he goes to these rallies and he plays the tough guy, weirdo, whatever it is. I want to answer all the questions, but he sat there in a case that was, at the end of the day, just asking questions about what's the valuation of Trump Tower? What's the valuation of Mar-a-Lago? What's the valuation of Bedminster? What did you report the valuation? Very basic questions. Fifth. In stark
Ben, do you know
contrast,
the only question that he was asked that he answered was his name? Other than that, he took the fifth on every other response.
Which I want to get your take, Michael, and if you think the Letitia, given that you are the main source of the information, Letitia James credited you for giving the document troves that led to her civil lawsuit. You know, my view is for the people who say, oh, you know, cases involving valuations are very difficult to prove sometimes. I said, I don't think this one really is, though, because in a normal course, you'd have the person who would testify in the civil case and wouldn't be a chicken shit, and they would stand up for their valuations, right? They'd say, yeah, that's that valuable. That has this value. I'm proud of what I told my lender. I'm proud. And yeah, do valuations fluctuate? Sure, they could fluctuate. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, the lender should take responsibility for it. But I told them, here's the disclaimer. But Trump didn't do any of that. He pled the fifth. And in a civil case, when you plead the fifth, unlike the criminal case, it is an adverse inference, meaning Tish James can look at the jury and say, or look at the judge and say, you see that? He didn't respond. He
had an opportunity to respond. He elected not to. And as a direct result, you, the jury, you members of the jury, have the right to imply a negative inference to the claims that he took, you know, to all the questions to which he responded, taking the fifth. That's just the way that it works. And that's why I believe that Tish James's claim is, or I should say her lawsuit, will, of course, resolve relatively quickly, and, of course, not inure to the benefit of Trump or the Trump organization. It's this case with the DA that is criminal in nature that has me very, very perplexed. And I'm very curious as to how this thing is going to play out. So if we asked Alan Weisberg, if I was the district attorney at the moment or one of the prosecutors in this case, and I asked Alan again that question about how many checks did you do? And then tell me, as you stated, Ben, tell me the process. How does a bill get processed at the Trump organization? What about the automobiles? How did you come, Alan Weisselberg, to being successful in receiving a Mercedes as part of, we'll just call it your perk package? How did that happen? Did you turn around and come to Donald? Did Donald turn around and say, hey, Alan, get yourself a Mercedes? Did the Lord come down from the heavens above and say, Alan, you're entitled to a Mercedes, right? And then all of a sudden, poof, there was one. Who knows the answer? Well, obviously, I know the answer. And this is what they're going to want to extract from Alan's testimony. The question then becomes, once the negative information that is returned to the judge and to the jury about how the process works, Donald Trump gets implicated in every single aspect, bar none, because there is nothing, and I want all you listeners to hear me on this, there is not a thing that goes on at the Trump organization that Donald is not directly involved with. All right, it's just the way that it works.
I'll give you one thing, Michael, and I'll play devil's advocate for a second, and really with the real devil here. And one thing that I think is a concern from a trial lawyer's perspective about what the jury, if I was concerned and I'm the district attorney, what the jury may do. The one thing I'd worry about is because Trump's not the organization and Trump are not being charged with the things in addition that and I know, and everybody watching this knows he should be charged with, and at the conclusion of the presentation of evidence, does the jury say, okay, but where's all the other stuff that he did? We know he did all these other crimes. Where's all that other stuff? And they're left a little bit like, huh? So we're just dealing with one.
But Ben, I don't think that's the way it's going to play out here. I think it plays out pursuant to the indictment, to the charges that have been brought against the Trump organization. And all of the testimony is now also available as well to the district attorney. But when the Trump organization is found guilty, and they will be found guilty, even in this criminal matter, what does District Attorney Alvin Bragg then do with this newfound evidence, this newfound information? Does he then immediately open up another investigation and file a formal indictment against Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, or whomever? Matt Calamari, whoever else is there? Does he then take that information and then create ancillary investigations? That's what's left to be seen here. My feeling is he has an opportunity to redeem himself. He really blew it with allowing the jury the grand jury to fade away on the second grand jury. So he has an opportunity now to redeem himself, at least in the eyes of New Yorkers, whereby he allowed them to escape liability, culpability, responsibility. So if that information is put out there, the question is, what does Alvin Bragg, what does the Southern District of New York, what does the Attorney General Tish James do with that newfound information? Because we know already that Tish James took certain information that she uncovered as a result of her lawsuit, her investigation. Again, that being civil in nature, but the criminal aspects like the tax evasion, she turned over to the IRS and to the DOJ, as well as the Southern District of New York, for potential prosecution. Again, the question becomes, what do they do with it? If they do nothing, it just goes to show you that the extent of the corruption that I disclose with specificity in my book, Revenge, has not changed at all, despite the fact that we are now being led by a Democratic president as opposed to, the dirtbag in chief and the GOP maggots.
And I'll leave you with this, Michael, because you just brought it up with the current administration. I've always said, because I know the processes and procedures sometimes within which how the Department of Justice pursues these investigations. And I told people, give Merrick Garland a chance, give him an opportunity to build the case from the lower rung people to the next more violent people, to the terrorist organizations, Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, now zeroing in on that next level of the John Eastmans and the Flynns and the Bannons and people, Kelly Wards, and people who were close to Trump. Let me just, if you can just, in short, what do you think about the current investigation by the Department of Justice? How do you think they're handling the process so far? And anything you want to say on that?
Yeah, very unimpressed. My true hope when I first learned that Merrick Garland was going to be our Attorney General is here we have a very decisive, a very pensive, and a very legitimate Attorney General. Of course, and I'm comparing that to Bill Barr. Then again, a fucking snake oil salesman, would be considered, a step up from Bill Barr. I'm very unimpressed. We're sitting now, January 6th committee, for what? Well in excess of, coming on 2 years, give or take. More than 1,000 people have given testimony, probably each one for no less than 8-9 hours at a clip. So you're talking about more than 1 year, 24/7 of testimony. Millions of documents were presented to them, and yet there's no indictment. If we don't have that indictment at this point in time, what are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing? We're going to wait now for the January 6th committee to send, their opinions to the DOJ to see whether or not that they're going to take legal action. Isn't this identical to what happened with the Mueller investigation? And obviously nothing came out of them. From a historical perspective, the January 6th committee is fantastic. They laid this out better than any docuseries ever could. It is emphatic. It was well scripted. It was, they used documentary as well as visual evidence within which to back up each and every one of their points and the statements. But at some point in time, this is all great. You know what we're all looking for? You, me, the millions of followers that we have combined. We're all looking for responsibility, accountability. We're waiting for a fucking indictment to come out from the DOJ, turning around saying, listen, Donald, enough is enough. Look, forgetting about the witness tampering, let's go back to the early parts, the Mueller, when Trump was witness tampering and obstructing of justice in my specific case. What about all of the other cases? What about the weaponization, for example, of the IRS against me, Comey, Andrew McCabe, where you got January 6th, you have, the stolen Mar-a-Lago documents that we have now learned are nuclear, that pertain to other countries, China, as well as, what was the other one?
Iran?
They said Iran. These are series that place our national security of this country in jeopardy. And yet, what do we have? Well, we're still working on bank fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion. So I don't understand. There's so many cases out there that should be already put this guy away, as you should see, behind bars, or at least put him into a significant home confinement for fear that he would, of course, turn on our country and sell the secrets. What are we doing? What are we doing? We're sitting there and we're waiting. That plays directly into the playbook of Donald Trump, which is delay. Now, all of a sudden, Merrick Garland and the DOJ are not interested in doing anything until after the midterm elections. Seriously? Personally, I don't give a shit if you do it on the day of the elections. Oh my God, they're going to say that you were interfering or you did interfere in the midterm election results. Listen, whatever it is that happens, any Republican that's going to lose, they're going to blame it on this shit anyway. If you're fucking guilty, then you're guilty. And let's stop giving this guy opportunities and benefits that you, Ben, that I for sure, or any of the followers that we have on with us today, or anyone else in this country would have or would be provided. If this was you, Ben, let me be very clear about this. If you took one document, forgetting about whether it's nuclear or not, one document that's labeled top secret, secret, whatever it might be, you would be in prison right now, just like they did to Reality Winner, all right, as an example, and others. You would be in jail. If you witness tampered or obstructed justice, you'd be in jail. If you committed tax evasion on a 15-plus year scheme, you'd be in jail. Why the fuck does this guy get a benefit whereby, everyone looks at him and says, holy shit, we really do have two completely different sets of justice, those who are in power and those of us who aren't, all right? Everybody has to be equal. And Donald, under no circumstance, should ever be able to say or believe that he is above the law. He is not. However, based upon this molasses through a strainer response by our DOJ and the fact that Alvin Bragg dropped the case against Donald, the fact that the Southern District of New York dropped the case against Donald and 10 other people where they had sealed indictments, on exactly what they convicted me of, which is the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. Look, I didn't sleep with her. He did. All right. I did pay her. He paid me back and took it as a tax deduction. All right. This man should have been indicted on the same theory that they went after me for. They didn't. The question becomes why. Much of this is discussed not by my words, but by, again, former federal prosecutors, current prosecutors, former judges, current judges, former FBI agents, current FBI agents, lawyers, accountants, bankers. It is discussed through their words in terms of what they know about this case and how the Southern District of New York used their power within which to crush a U.S. citizen, right, to create the most corrupt case against a U.S. citizen, not even including the unconstitutional remand of me back to Otisville because I wouldn't waive my First Amendment rights. All of this discussed and more in Revenge, which is important because, again, and I say this all the time, if they could do this to me, think about what they can do to you. That's why I'm asking everyone to buy the book so you understand the game, the play book that Donald will use in order to destroy our democracy.
Michael, is the limited signed edition still available on the website if people go to the website, or do those sell out?
You know, most, I think there are still a few. I am a little bit shocked that, that there are a few left, but I believe that there are still a few left. You go to revenge-thebook.com. You can get it there. And for the regular one, you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that you get your books. It's also on Kindle. And now, as of 2 days ago, it's now up in audiobook as well.
It's incredible. Michael
So
Cohen,
for those lazy people out there, there's it's read to you.
Oh, don't be a hater on audiobook listeners. Audiobook listeners, and as long as they're listening and getting the information, whatever format,
that is the important
thing. I think it's helpful, and that's why I think these live hits that you and I are doing and will be doing in the future, breaking down what's taking place on day one of the Trump organization as a criminal defendant in Manhattan court right now, having this commentary from you who knows more about this than anyone. And on this format, Michael, where we don't just have to do the sound bite, I love watching you on the big media networks and you do a great job. But after watching you, sometimes they only give you 6 minutes or 5 minutes or 8 minutes. And I go, I need a full half hour or at least 40 minutes with Michael Cohen to explain all of these issues, which is why I love this format we do here on the Midas Touch Network. Everybody make sure to check out Revenge, How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics. Michael Cohen's new book, Revenge. Buy it now wherever books are available, including audio. And make sure you get your Mar-a-Lardo in prison t-shirt at store.midastouch.com. That's store.midastouch.com. And also for anybody out there who wants to continue to support this independent media network, you can check us out at patreon.com/MidasTouch. That's patreon.com/MidasTouch. We are not funded by billionaires or millionaires. We have no outside investors at all. We're powered by democracy and fueled by you watching this wherever you get this YouTube channel. And so support us at patreon.com/MidasTouch. A number of exclusive membership tiers there, but most importantly, you can help grow this network. Michael Cohen, final words.
Final words, please, to those viewers that are out there. Pick up the shirt. I want to, when I'm walking through Central Park or through the city, or as I'm going to be starting to travel the United States, I'd love to see more and more people wearing this shirt. It's important. I'm going to be in LA on November 1. We're actually doing a live we're doing a Mea Culpa live event at the El Rey Theater, which about 400 people. I'm going to have as my special guest that night, other than, of course, the Mycelis brothers here, who hopefully they'll show up. But we already have commitments from Kathy Griffin, from Harry Littman, as well as Jason Van Tattenhove. You may remember him. He's the Oath Keeper, the former Oath Keeper spokesperson. It'll be a live event. It's going to also be a Q&A. There'll be meet and greets. It's going to be a really interesting event. It'll be our first of its kind, and then we're going to start doing them all over the country. One of the things that between Midas Touch as well as Mea Culpa, my podcast, our goal is to build a movement like all of you who are on, and there's a lot of people on, today. The goal about having this group is we're able to then mobilize as we're starting to come into the midterm elections as well as to the general election. If we lose the House, I promise you, day number one, you're going to see an impeachment, the articles of impeachment filed against Joe Biden. And you may all scratch your head and say, hey, what can they possibly do? They're going to do an articles of impeachment against him for whether it's Afghanistan, COVID. They're going to do it for anything that they can figure out how to attach Joe Biden to his son, Hunter Biden, all of this nonsense. The danger is what happens with the Senate. We need to keep both houses. Otherwise, we're going to have another 2 years with Biden and Kamala as lame duck administration. We can't do that. We are really on the precipice of big problems in this country, economically, politically. So one of the things I do ask, I actually beseech each and every one of you, if you're going to vote, and I pray to God that each and every one of you do, I ask you to please ask your neighbors, ask your friends, ask your relatives, ask whoever is anywhere near you. Grab 3, 4, 5 people and take them with you. Take them with you to the polls, and let's make sure that we have a blue wave. Because rest assured, if we end up with a red wave in 14 days from now, the democracy that we all know is going to be lost. And so it's really the question everybody asks me, what can I do about it? What can I do? Fucking vote. That's what you need to do. Just vote. Vote blue. Get as many people out there. Join the movements. Do whatever you can to help, the Democrats, ensure that we keep the House, we keep the Senate, and that Joe Biden is able to effectuate some change. Whether you love the guy or you don't. Because, look, there are things I don't agree with. But for the most part, I'll tell you what I do agree. I agree that he cares more about this country than Donald Trump. That I can promise you.
Well, I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Cohen. I share those sentiments 100%. Great having you on this live edition, Michael Cohen. Everybody, you can again check us out at patreon.com/MidasTouch. Check out Michael Cohen's book, Revenge. Get the gear at store.MidasTouch.com. Check out Michael Cohen at the El Rey Theater. Doing a lot. Let's keep fighting for democracy.
Mea Culpa podcast. Oh, and if you enjoy TikTok, if you happen to be one of those people that scroll the most of the time, I'm on TikTok too. What I understand, my TikToks are kind of funny.
Your TikToks are more than funny. They're incredible. All right. We'll see everybody next time here on the Midas Touch Network. Michael Cohen, let's do it again. I'm Ben Meiselas. Until next time.